Hello. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. We're here. We're back for another week. We're sorry we're a little delayed this week with our recording, but we're happy to be in your ears now when we are. My name is Gregg Blake. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show. We're doing a truncated members of the pod this evening. We're late on our recording. This is how devastating the loss was for us. Nick, my lovely, talented, brilliant co-host, Nick Olson, how are you this evening?
Just like the Vikings have had a COVID outbreak and bodies are dropping everywhere, so too, the Kindred Skulls podcast feels this deeply in our bones that we too are also down a man tonight and we're a day late. But in the spirit of giving it everything we've got, you know, we're coming to you nonetheless.
Exactly. As the team goes, we go, you know? When they don't show up, we don't show up. when they blow it in the final moments, we blow it in the final moments. that's what we're trying to do. This is really a meta podcast. We're trying to, elevate the art form a bit.
Hearts on sleeves here. Hearts on sleeves.
Yeah, exactly. The show is really an art piece. That's what we're going for. Let's get into it, man. Now, we get another week where we extol the virtues of our opponent and point out things that could be issues for us. And lo and behold, things kind of unfold pretty similarly to the way we thought they would. Maybe with more scoring on our side of things than I anticipated. What just generally emotionally, what are your reactions to the loss this week, Nick? How do you feel about it?
I have a lot of feelings. This was, I think, a particularly rough one because we came out to such a strong start, and then it was like the same story, broken record, losing our minds here, watching us slowly choke it away through a combination of 3 and outs and just defense not being able to get off the field, and not necessarily any one like egregious mistake, just like a lot of different things. But like the fact that we had 2 big turnovers, we had a kickoff return for a touchdown, first time in a long time, which was awesome to see from the rookie. But, we had a lot of things go our way in this game, and to still have to see Kirk Cousins at the very end go down and lead a game-winning score, and then see the defense magically stop Justin Tucker thanks to penalties from putting us away in the end of the fourth quarter, then going into overtime and seeing them drive all the way down the field into field goal range, and then Anthony Barr make this incredible interception, and then promptly go 3 and out in overtime,
3 and out,
and then have them drive down the field and put us away. It was a particularly. It's like, oh man, I feel like I should be numb to this. The Vikings this is the 3rd overtime game in 9 games. I should be numb to this. Vikings find a way, man. I'm like, oh man, we're up 14 in the 3rd quarter. This is great. Certainly even the Vikings can't screw this up. Well, yeah. I should know better.
I mean, absolutely, we should all know better. We really all should know so much better. I have a stack of 4K DVDs that I purchased just sitting over here unwatched, for all this time that I could be spending my Sundays digging through the works of Kira Kurosawa, and just like really diving in, just do Hitchcock from
having
A to
Z. Midlife crisis. What am I in my 30s and this is what I'm doing with my free time? Think of all the more productive things.
Sitting there on Sunday, just like getting slowly drunker and just like what am I participating in here? What is this? Super disappointing loss. Let's hit some of the high points in this loss first before we talk about the downers, okay? Because we obviously don't feel good about the game. I can really only think of one strong point off the top of my head, and it's one I actually played with the idea of taking an egg and breaking it over my face on this episode. And then I realized that, it might weird you guys out. And then we ended up pushing the recording, and I was like, all right, I'm not going to do this. I have egg on my face, Nick. Kene Nwangwu showing up, making a big play on special teams. welcome to the team, buddy. What a cool moment that was. Where were you when Kenny Nwangwu broke one for a big kickoff touchdown?
Where was I? To be honest, this is where I come clean and say I did not watch the game live this week.
We're blowing it, man.
I was watching Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. I've always wanted to do that. So
well, that's I mean, that's some way better use of your time. Way better use of your time.
Yeah, exactly. So it's funny. I went into the theater. I think when I saw saw it on Twitter, and I was like, perfect. We gave up this boneheaded defensive pass interference to come into the half, but hey, we're back on top of this, man. 14 points on top of the Ravens, third quarter. This is great. And then I went into the show. I checked my phone at intermission, and I think what happened at intermission is I saw the Barr interception in overtime, and I was like, Barr got an interception in overtime. We're gonna drive down the field and win. And then coming out of the theater, I checked Twitter, and the first thing I see is like, man, what a disappointing. How did we choke that one away? And I was like,
oh man.
So that's where I was when I was watching. But going back and watching, I mean, you see the speed. And it was not just that play too. It was also the fake on the 4th and 2 or whatever.
Yep.
Where they went for it. Nice to see Zimmer aggressive on 2 fourth downs, both paying off big for the Vikings in this game. But yeah, man, it's not just the speed. He saw a vision that was like a tough hole. He also made Justin Tucker, the kicker, like miss, which obviously like it's not the toughest thing, but he had to like at full speed, lean it, sort of slide into one gap or one lane, and then like shoot out, bounce out the outside, and then just outrun everybody. So I think
he's got this kind of neat straight up and down running style that was kind of cool to watch. I dug it.
It's a big credit to Ryan Ficken. I think we're seeing, special teams has been at times bad. I mean, we can think of the block punt return for a touchdown against Carolina, but compared to last year under Marlon Maloof, it's like been night and day better. And that's with largely the same people, I think. I think it's been great to see like D.D. Westbrook in there, although he's been up and down, but like Kenny Nwangwu breaking out this game has been awesome. But we're also seeing like Jordan Berry, I think, is having a very strong year as a punter. Unfortunately, we're having to see a little bit too much of him. But even Greg Joseph is like, he hasn't been the disaster week I think a lot of us expected him to be. So I do think
one big missed kick early in the year, but other than that.
Missed the game winner, but that's like one of the few kicks he's missed. So overall percentages are pretty good. So I feel like overall the Ryan Ficken experiment is going well. So if we clean house, there's one guy we don't necessarily have to boot. So.
Yeah, keep that one. Can he call an offense? All right,
so another guy. While I'm on it, let's do the whole silver lines. While I'm on it, another guy. If we clean house, which I still maintain we shouldn't. But if we clean house, another guy who we should definitely do everything to keep is Andre Patterson, because we're seeing a lot of these young guys, not just Armin Watson, James Lynch, who I think continue to have very strong performances in the absence of Michael Pierce. Like this Baltimore offensive line is tough, and we saw it like on that 20 play drive, like they were just bulldozing dudes. But like James Lynch, Armin Watson, both really I think have really come on strong. They're not like I don't think they're going to be Pro Bowler types, but as rotational guys. You would expect Michael Pierce, Dalvin Tomlinson's backups to be significant downgrades. And these guys are really good, and they do a good job on the snaps they're in there. But I think this was kind of the Kenny Willekes breakout game. He had a couple really impressive snaps. You see the bend, you see he's kind of like not the normal body type of a defensive end. He's a little undersized, and he's a little like short and like compact, not like giant arms, but he finds a way to win through a combination of motor and leverage and bendiness and just sort of like will to win. So having not just a sack but a couple other really strong pressures was really great to see these young guys break out, because if we're going to do anything this season without Danielle Hunter, we need Andre Patterson to cook up some magic for us. So I have been impressed with the pass rush. And with the performance of the defensive line, especially the young guys in the last few weeks. So totally I think that's a credit to Andre Pat. And you throw into that also Everson Griffin's bounce back here. He continues to play, considering how bad Everson Griffin, like last year, he did like kind of look washed for most of the season. His stint with the Cowboys was awful. And this year he looks like the old Everson Griffin, like a very high quality starter. So that's another silver lining.
Yeah.
Now we can talk about how we can't get a first down for our life. So.
I think that might be the end of the silver linings, unfortunately. I mean,
Oh.
we definitely had some guys with some stats this week, but um, it it feels empty. I keep looking at the score of this game, and for the life of me, I can't wrap my mind around it because watching the game, the experience of watching it, and I want to talk a little bit about our different experiences watching it because and a couple of things I want to talk about on that, but uh, it didn't feel like a game that was so high scoring, and I can't really explain it other than to say it just didn't feel like that.
I think it was the Ravens didn't really have any explosives. Their longest play of the day was that I'm not going to say it was incorrectly called defensive pass interference play, but it was an underthrown ball where was it Dantzler didn't get his head turned around.
I believe so. Yeah.
And like when it's an underthrown ball and you don't get your head turned around, you just wind up like tackling the guy midair because you can't stop on a dime. But it's like Dantzler, well, I don't know what a defensive back is supposed to do in that situation. So anyway, that was their biggest play. I think their next biggest was like 22 yards, and that was like the Patrick Ricard like rumble tumble for like 22 yards or something. But they had like 4 plays of over 10 yards, and a lot of it was just 5 yards here, 4 yards there. Lamar picks up a first down, a 4-yard, pin pull, a 5-yard bash counter, and then like another first down. And like it was just a lot of death by 1,000 cuts. So it didn't necessarily feel like an explosive incredible. I mean, the Vikings had explosives. The Vikings had kind of the opposite problem. We had Dalvin with like a 50+ yard run and a couple other giant runs and like a bomb to Justin Jefferson for a touchdown. Right. But it otherwise, felt like we went 3 now. So
yeah, absolutely. And similarly to the Ravens, though, after that strong start, which is where most of those plays happened for the Vikings, we had a series of empty drives, which is one of the ongoing themes of the season at this point. Multiple stretches in a game, where we just can't seem to get anything going on offense. Similarly to the Ravens, that second half of the game, some of our biggest plays were coming on pass interference penalties and mistakes from the Ravens as well. So to your point, I think that is kind of what contributed to the way the game felt versus what the score is. And it's kind of like, oh man, that's not what I watched. I did not watch a shootout between two, master class here. Like that was not what this experience was. So that's interesting that you point out the lack of explosive plays. That definitely contributed to it. I want to talk about our experiences watching. So for me, the game ended. No matter what happened, I just knew we were going to lose. When on that long killer drive from Baltimore in the third quarter, where they stayed on the field, I think it was 15 plays, and they ate something like 7 or 8 minutes off the clock. And just watching, because it had come right on the heels of us blowing another drive, 3 and out, and they just ground us into the dirt. Totally bullied us. And I felt like that was, for me, the turning point in the game. I didn't believe we could win after that. No matter what happened, I just had this seed of doubt that was buried at that moment because we just looked like they took control of the game, it felt like. How did you feel, though, watching it from a different perspective, not live? I'm sure that it was a lot different.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's tough. Like that was a drive where there were a couple of big plays there, but for the most part, it was just like 4 yards, 4 yards, 4 yards, 4 yards, 4 yards, 4 yards, and like ad nauseum. So it's tough because I feel like the Ravens understood that the way to beat our team was to use their sort of strength and weight advantage. They've got some really big bodies in their offensive line with their fullback and with the way they use Lamar Jackson. And they were they just said, we're going to take these little tiny chunk plays and we're going to eat up and we're going to wear this defense out. And I do think by the end you were seeing the defense wore out. I think that's kind of what happened is you saw the defense actually started out really strong. I think their first drive wound up with that DJ Wanham horse collar, which I think was incorrectly called. I think Wanham made a really good play there, and I don't really think he was grabbed by the horse collar. But it should have been a fumble recovery on fourth down or whatever, and instead they went up with a field goal. But then they kind of go. We went into that half thinking, other than that defensive pass interference, that like, man, Lamar is off his game. The cornerbacks are playing really well in coverage. Pass rush is really getting home. They're really doing a good job with their keeping contain on their lanes and not letting Lamar beat them too much. So
they weren't scoring a lot.
And then they kind of got like beaten up and worn down. And I think Kendricks, you started to see some of the wear and tear, and the linebackers kind of started getting bullied, and all of a sudden they were getting gashed for big runs in the run game. So normally analytics would say like, rushing efficiency doesn't increase over the course of a game. But I think in this game where they played almost 100 snaps on defense, like you're going to feel that. So.
It's ludicrous.
Yeah.
It's a ludicrous amount.
Yeah. So frustrating game.
Yeah. Super frustrating to watch.
I will say there are, anytime nobody wants to hear this, but there's like a lot of signs that this is still a good team, and there's like a lot of things they do really well, and we don't get to focus on them as much because the tenor after these games is, we're 3-5, fire everybody. But like, this is a team that's still like, I think 11th in DVOA. They're like the third best defense by EPA against or whatever. They're like this number 6 defense by like team PFF grade or team defensive PFF grade. So defense is doing a lot of things interesting, and like Kirk Cousins is like the number 2 graded quarterback. So like, they're doing things well, and I think we're seeing like they've got offensive weapons when you get the ball and Cooks happen or Jefferson or Thielen. Yeah, is that they're not getting the ball in their hands. They're doing go balls to CJ Ham down the sideline, or how many like hitches do we see to Tyler Conklin underneath that like went for nothing? And that's really, if I were to diagnose one problem with the team, is that there's so much quick game, and there's so much it's first down, it's second and 10. We're going to dink it down to Tyler Conklin for 3 yards or something. And, now it's 3rd and 7, and you can't build an offense out of like 5-step drops or 3-step drops that go to a tight end underneath on like a little hitch and gets tackled immediately by a linebacker. Like, I feel like if you looked at a heat map of where the Vikings target, like so much of Kirk Cousins stuff is going within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. It
would look like a Ben Simmons shot chart after a game,
Yeah, exactly.
Everything's happening real.
Everything right there.
Tiny little circle, yeah.
So, unlike in basketball, this is that's a very inefficient way of constructing your passing game. So, It's frustrating, man. The offensive line I thought actually played pretty well. So they got to figure out a way to push the ball downfield more. They can't keep relying on quick game and yak. The problem with Clint Kubiak is he thinks he's Kyle Shanahan. And he's just not, man. He's like, guys aren't getting that open. You've got Justin Jefferson, you've got Adam Thielen. You got to find a way to get the ball to these guys because they can do a great job getting open. You need to stop throwing the ball on swing routes 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage, or little quick wide receiver screens that go for 4 yards, man. You need to, if that's what your passing game is, it's really just an extension of your run game. And you're kind of living off explosives at that point. And what we're seeing is the Vikings are trying to live off explosives. And if they don't get the explosives, they settle for a little 3-4 yard gains, and then they go 3 and out. So
there's nothing in between.
So frustration with Clint Kubiak.
Yeah, it's pretty frustrating. I don't really have much more I really want to say about this.
Let's talk about all the other things that are miserable right now.
Exactly. We literally
we haven't even gotten into the COVID outbreak. And
our next segment is called Bad News Vikings. That's what we are right now. It feels like that's kind of the year we're having. So I think you and I are both on the same page. We don't really want to discuss the details of the situation with Dalvin. Obviously, though, from a team perspective, this has the potential to affect us. I mean, there's the simple things, the emotional, personal side of it. Dalvin's laundry is being aired for the world to see, and is that going to affect his head being in the game? Again, we're not making a commentary on this show about the legal side of it. Just the fact is, it'll almost certainly be distracting for him. Beyond that, who knows, as far as the repercussions of everything, if we'll see that even impact the season at all, that's probably something more for next year. But it's an awful situation. We've seen this before with Vikings players, unfortunately, off-field troubles. It rarely ends in them playing at their highest level.
Yeah.
How do you feel about what to expect here from Delvin?
It's tough. You have to analyze it on a few different wavelengths, because like, just as a fan and as somebody who is pulling for Dalvin, because I feel like he's been through a lot between the loss of his father and his upbringing, where he came from a rough place in Florida, and kind of hung out with the wrong crowd in college, and paid for it. And that's why there's some questions coming into the draft. It wasn't that he was a bad kid or anything. It was just, he did not lead a very privileged life in a lot of ways, and that he was kind of a reflection of the community he came from in some ways. It's disappointing to see this come out. The complaint, which you can read because now it's been publicly filed, makes Cook look very bad. I won't necessarily air out all but not just the violence, but the like infidelity, like he does not look like a good guy in the complaint. And granted, that's her word against his. We don't know if any of this is true or not. That is what
they're designed to do. Yeah,
but I do believe your first instinct should always be to believe the victim that's coming forward, and take them at their word, and hear them out earnestly, and not just block it out because you're a fan of the team or whatever. And so Dalvin, from a personal level, it's really disappointing and makes it harder to root for these kinds of guys. But you also have to analyze it, like, because of fantasy football, because of betting these days. There's also just the fact of like, will Dalvin Cook be a Viking tomorrow? And you have to analyze that. And I think from that perspective, the answer is yes. I fully expect Dalvin Cook to be a Viking going forward. Yeah. I think this is a he said, she said situation. Really, it's a he said, she said, she said. It's a he said, she said, because there's two independent witnesses, and Dalvin Cook's attorney has come forward and said basically, they're siding with Dalvin Cook's side of the story, which is the story of the assault really is, or the confrontation that happened is this ex-girlfriend or girlfriend who hadn't officially broken up yet flies in from Florida, comes to Dalvin Cook's home around November, I think last year, and enters the home through the garage door, grabs a can of mace that she kept there at Dalvin Cook's house, and it eventually happens that, she comes back to grab her stuff to basically say we're splitting. And Dalvin Cook winds up being maced. They both wind up being maced. A fight breaks out. She winds up, you've probably seen the pictures if you're watching the show, she winds up with pretty severe injuries to her face and body. And eventually winds up going to the hospital to have that looked at and repaired. So a kind of a really ugly situation. It is domestic violence because it's an ex-girlfriend. And so from a Vikings perspective, I think this is sort of a he said, she said situation where you're not necessarily, it's not entirely clear for me from reviewing both Cook's side of the story and her side of her complaint, that there's a clear victim here. And I think often with toxic relationships, there isn't necessarily a clear victim initially.
Yeah. And we're definitely not here to litigate that together in this moment. It's definitely not on our shoulders.
And we can't. I mean, there's still,
and nor should it be. We're just fans of the team.
So, but at the same time, you have to answer should I start Dalvin Cook on my fence? Should I trade him or whatever? And it feels gross to kind of answer that question. My perspective is I don't see this as a civil case, and I don't, because of the castle doctrine in Minnesota, which is, you have the right to react violently when somebody trespasses into your house, in states that have that law, which Minnesota does. It's hard to see the civil case going very far, which makes me think that the Vikings aren't going to necessarily cut Dalvin Cook. And the NFL's suspension policy is less clear. It's more there isn't a policy. It's just kind of here's what we think about it. But it's still hard to say Dalvin Cook was 100% in the wrong here. So that's what. It's a sucky situation that is very muddled, and it just makes it harder to be a fan of this team sometimes.
Yeah, it's just added to the pile. Let's move on, and I'm sure that is something that will also unfortunately linger for a little while, and I'm going to avoid it as much as possible because it's such a huge bummer all around for the humans involved. So let's also, send some good vibes, listeners together, you and I here in this moment right now. Let's send some good vibes to Dakota Dozier, who is, I'm not sure if he's still in the hospital, but who went to the hospital this week with a COVID infection that got really serious. I don't think there's anything really to say. Just our thoughts go out to him, and I hope he gets very better soon.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, even a professional athlete that can, in the prime of their life, can succumb to this stuff and wind up in the hospital. It's scary stuff. So
it's super scary stuff.
Shout out, thoughts, prayers out to Dozier.
Yes, absolutely. And we also don't, just to talk about the logistics of things, there are supposed to be a number of contacts as well. We haven't been told the names of those folks or if there are players involved yet. I'm guessing at this point we would have found out if there was other players that needed to be sat.
Yeah, so there was something like 29 close contacts, but at the same time, we haven't necessarily seen anybody else placed on the COVID reserve list. So it's unclear if this is if it's just Harrison Smith and a few other guys, or if it's anyone more. But so far, seems like I remember I saw some friends earlier in the week being like, "Are we going 29 close contacts? Are we going to have to forfeit this upcoming game?" But it seems like for now we'll see. But not spreading too much like wildfire just yet.
Fingers crossed. For him, most of all. So I don't think there's really been a lot of news as far as hot seats go, but let's lead into talking about this next game a little bit by saying, do we think that this is a super hot seat game, or do we think that this is still the hot seat is mostly for the fans at this point in regards to Zimmer and Spielman and all the things that we talked about last week?
I think the Wilfs want to see the Vikings. I think the Wilfs view this as a playoff team, and the difference between 4-13 versus 8-9 is not going to make a meaningful difference. I think the Wilfs are going to view either as we gave you a Super Bowl contending roster, you gave us we didn't even get a wild card spot, right. So pack your bags. And I think that would be a mistake, but I think that's what the Wilfs are going to do at the end of the year. I do think I don't think there's any advantage to firing Zimmer mid-season, so I don't expect that to happen. So that's with that in mind, whether they come out of the Chargers game 3-6 or 4-5 or whatever, or what are we? 4-5. That would be. I don't really think it makes a material difference. I think either way they're in the playoff hunt, but it would take a lot of magic either way. So in a weird way. I don't think this necessarily changes that narrative of who's on the hot seat and who's not.
And believe it or not, even if we do lose this game and the Packers game, if the Atlanta Falcons are in the running for a playoff spot, then we will be for a while, because that team's not much better than us, that's for sure. And there are a few of those teams in that range of wins right now. So this season it's going to drag on. It's going to drag on, man.
We're not going anywhere.
We're not getting rid of it anytime soon.
Boy, what a season it's been. It's week 9.
I'm not getting to that Kurosawa disc anytime soon. You know what I mean? I'm just going to be glued to my seat every Sunday, just slowly growing older. Oh, God. All right.
Chargers are a tough matchup, man. Like Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is like what everybody wishes we would have had, is like the young, dynamic, big-armed, mobile, incredible athlete, lighten up the league quarterback. And meanwhile, we're stuck puttering along with Kirk Cousins. So they got a lot of weapons. They got the Rashawn Slater, the tackle we tried to trade up for, who's having just an absolutely dominant year. It's funny, the left side of that line is really good. They invested in it. They picked up Matt Filer from the Steelers, who's having a great year. They picked up Corey Linsley from the Packers, who's having a nice year. But on the right side of the line, they've got our old friend, former Viking and XFL star Storm Norton at right tackle. So
Storm Norton.
It's a very, like, the left side of the line looks amazing. The right side of the line looks very exploitable. And then, obviously Keenan Allen's the star of the show there, but Mike Williams is a touchdown machine. They got a lot of weapons, so it will be tough slowing them down defensively.
Really tough. And well, let's get into the defense a little bit because they're a top 5 passing defense, and they are literally the worst rushing defense in the NFL. And yet again, for the 3rd week in a row, if that sounds fucking familiar to you, it should, because that's exactly the kind of team we've been facing here. Yeah. And I think the question is going to be this week, how do we attack that? Because here we are, a team that ostensibly gets a lot done through the air, and a team that ostensibly loves to run. So are we going to lean heavily on the run this week? Are we going to try to take advantage of that? Are we going to inexplicably not run the ball this week? Like, what do you think is going to be the attack here?
Yeah, it's a good question. The pass rush is the pass defense is interesting because they kind of have studs and duds. It's kind of similar to like the Rams, where they have like Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, and I guess they added Von Miller now. But it's like kind of like, it's okay if we surround you with like Mario Edwards or whoever, or these, just random, just a guys, when we have like an Aaron Donald. And same thing with the Chargers. Like, they've got a couple random guys, but like Joey Bosa is kind of the motor of that show. I mean, they do have Linval Joseph, who is still, even in his mid-30s, I think, he's got some juice, and he's obviously, he's still the giant hulking long-armed beast of a man, but no longer in his athletic prime. It'll be good to see good old Linval back, but Bosa is kind of the star. Really, of that front 7, he's the only plus guy, I would say, on the whole front 7. So they've struggled some linebackers. They're a little banged up there too, but that's kind of the main guy. So anytime that your front 7 looks like that, you worry about Nick Bosa coming after you as a pass rusher, but when you're running the ball, you can just, pick a running play that goes away from him. And you can kind of scheme. It's easier to scheme around just having one star pass rusher in the run game than it is to scheme around it because you can always chip him and stuff, but sometimes chips hurt you more than they help you. So I do think this will probably be a big Dalvin game. It was good to see a little bit more explosiveness from him last week. They do have some interesting cover guys. Obviously, Derwin James is a star on the back end, but they still got Chris Harris, who's I think still a very good cornerback even in his late years, and some other like not necessarily star guys like Nazir Adderley isn't like necessarily like a Pro Bowler, but he's like a solid player. He's not going to be the weak spot in your coverage. So they've got some talent to be good on defense. At the same time, I'm a lot more worried about Justin Herbert than I am about like Nick Bosa. So. Even though Nick Bosa is really good, I just think you can. There's a way to make sure Nick Bosa has a quiet game just by trying to put the ball away from him. So
it's a tough matchup, man. Now, did you know that the Minnesota Vikings have not allowed a touchdown to a tight end yet this year?
I did not know that. That is a fun fact.
Fun fact. And another fun fact is the Chargers actually have 2 that can score touchdowns. So I'm honed in on that matchup this week because he leans on those tight ends and key moments, especially in the red zone. So I'm curious if that streak ends this week for the Vikes. Anything else about? I think it's the bottom line is it's another matchup where I don't think we align as poorly against the Chargers as we have against the Cowboys and the Ravens, especially given the fact that, we can run the ball. I really hope that we come out and don't, for some reason, fail in that category, which is something that happens sometimes. A team that is, supposed to be terrible at stopping the run just gets up for it one week and they just stop you and you're like, what the hell happened, I really don't want to see that. I want to see us come out and do what we do and give Dalvin the ball and take it down the field. And then I want to see us do it again. And then I want to see us do it in the 3rd quarter and the 4th quarter. Like I want to see a full sustained rushing attack this week. Not giving up on it too early, let things loose a little bit too. Like you said, Yeah, they've got a good passing defense, but if we can get the ball moving a little bit, maybe that'll loosen up.
Yeah, this is weird because we're a 3-5 team, and our chances of the playoffs are kind of up in smoke. But I feel weirdly confident about this one. I don't know why. I just feel like this team has a lot of fight and heart, and they're eventually going to show it. And I think Zimmer has always been very good at adjustments, not just within a game, but throughout the season. And he kind of figures out what's going wrong. And I think it's weird how critical I've been of Clint Kubiak, but I feel like he really understands what's going wrong with his offense. And like, you watch his pressers, and it's not like he's got his head in the sand about, he understands, like, yeah, we're stalling, we're going 3 and out. Justin Jefferson isn't getting enough targets. Adam Thielen's not getting enough targets. We're not pushing the ball downfield. So I feel like they're going to get it. And eventually, this is a team that I continue to believe, despite its record, is playing a lot better than its record would suggest. And eventually we're going to see it. I think if this were on a neutral field, and actually the betting line is -3, which is
I'm going to stop you there.
The Vikings are the better team on a neutral field.
So. LA is a neutral field. So this bolsters your point. I'm not even kidding. It's literally a neutral field. Yeah. So actually, I think this bolsters your point. Yeah. I think we do have a chance here. These guys are not some unbeatable juggernaut. They're a team that has warts as well. I mean, Justin Herbert's coming off of a 2-week stretch where he could barely move the ball himself. So definitely an opportunity here. I think before the bye week, I would have said the Packers were the biggest opportunity we have. After the bye week, as things have progressed here, I think this is the game. I think you're right. Of that 4-game stretch, I think this is the one where we could pick it up too. I agree with you. Yeah. Any last thoughts on the Chargers?
No, I don't know.
Okay. We managed to get a whole podcast out.
Despite all the things that have gone wrong this week, we made it to the
end. Despite it all, we actually did it. We're down a member, Matt is missed, of course, but we got through it. I think it's time for 15 seconds of fantasy. How do you feel about that?
I'm feeling it, Greg.
It's going to be 10 seconds this week, okay?
10 seconds of fantasy. I only need 5 seconds. I only need 3 words, Greg.
All right, 10 altogether. We know that our listeners don't want to hear us talk about our fantasy teams, but we're in a fantasy team league together, so we desperately want to talk about it. So every week we dedicate 15 seconds of the podcast to fantasy, unless there's only 2 members, in which case it's 10 seconds. Starting now. Go, Nick.
I'm 9-0. Still leading the league in points. Suck it.
Oh, man, I'm coming for you, man. I'm coming for that ass. I'm coming for it. It's going to come at the moment you least expect it. All right. Really good 15 seconds of fantasy there. You can find Matt Freese, who's not here with us this evening, at Freese Football on Twitter. Nick, where can people find you on Twitter?
At Nick Olson NFL.
Excellent. I can't believe I did it again. It's at Fries Football. Ugh. You can follow Nick at Nick Olson NFL, as he just said. You can follow me at You've Been Gregg on either Twitter or Instagram. I'm mostly on Instagram. And you can find us on Twitter as a collective at Kindred Skulls. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube. The show always goes up in video form by searching Kindred Skulls in the YouTube search box, and the link to that is also in our Twitter bio. Nick, it's been a lovely evening chatting with you. Let's hope for a big win this week. I think we need it.
After everything that's happened between this, it's funny. Like I turned from the Vikings to the Timberwolves, and man, I don't know if you're a Wolves fan, but it's even worse if you can believe it. So being Andrew Wiggins dunk over our Karl-Anthony Towns is just like, that's being a Timberwolves fan in a microcosm. So.
I will say though that Anthony Edwards is an absolute delight, and truly, if you have a tendency to want to watch the Wolves, I don't care if they're losing. He's worth tuning in for right now. 48 points.
That's the thing. The Wolves, no matter how bad they are, will always give you some shred of reason to hope and believe. And right now, Ant's the dude. So.
He might be the guy, though. He really might. But that's a whole other conversation. That's for our Timberwolves podcast, which apparently we need to do. I had no idea you were a fan. That's like it's being a fan of the Timberwolves is like a little dirty secret you keep to yourself because you don't want to really get into.
Too embarrassed to discuss it in polite company.
Like I don't want to talk about the Timberwolves.
Makes me depressed.
Just leave me alone.
Which flavor of pain is worse? Like the pain of like constantly coming close and losing with the Vikings, or the pain of never having any hope but still getting disappointed with the Wolves? You know, it's just pick your poison.
They're both very different brands of pain. All right, it's been a lovely time. I'm gonna give you a digital hug. Any last words?
Goodbye. I love you.
Another first-round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first-round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first-round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind, and we'll score.